QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021, enter service items. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitar practice file. We have the home page open. We also have the open windows open. You can open up the open windows by selecting the view dropdown and the open windows list. We're going to be entering service items at this point in time. Now, when you think of service items, you want to think about some terminology with regards to service items. Service means that it's what we do to generate revenue, and what we do in the case of a service items is not selling inventory. We're not talking about inventory that we sell. We do some type of service, such as bookkeeping type of service, and therefore we don't have to deal with the physical inventory. It will be a bit easier to enter. Items, then, when we think of items, that's not really an accounting term so much as a QuickBooks term. Items are the things that we use in order to enter into the system, which QuickBooks calls items. So you want to be aware of that term. For QuickBooks terms, you want to think of it kind of like a QuickBooks term rather than like an accounting in general term, although there'll be overlap between the two. Also note that those items will be found in what under QuickBooks will be often called, in quotes, lists, a type of list, especially in the desktop version, because it's going to be in this drop down of one of our major lists. So when you think about items, where to find items, you will often hear that items is a list type of thing. So you're going to want to go to the lists drop down and find the items. You can also find it over here on the home page. They generally will include the service items on the right hand side as well. Now, when we enter the items, our goal is to make our data input as easy as possible. If we have a service that we provide, we might provide the service hourly, but even if we do so, we might want to move away from just an hourly service. We could still set up an item for hourly service, but we might want to move away from that and try to group our service into chunks or specific units so that the billing of the items that we do will be easier. For example, if we do bookkeeping, and we just say that this is what we charge for so many transactions or this range of transactions rather than an hourly rate, then the bookkeeping becomes a lot easier for us to standardize from month to month as opposed to trying to track the hours. So that's one way you could think about it. If we open the invoice, our goal is to make the invoice data input as easy as possible. The items will then be populated in this items dropdown that will help us to populate the invoice, which we can then send to the client. So how do we enter those items? We want to enter the item. Now, we could enter them one by one as we go right here. Like I can add a new item as we go, and we will do that in the future to demonstrate that process. But now we want to enter multiple items at one point in time. So I'm going to be closing this back out. We're going to go into our items lists. Again, you could do that by going to the items on the right side. I like to go to the lists drop down. You will hear the term lists when you're discussing items for many bookkeepers that use the desktop version. Here's going to be our item list. I'm going to close out the window on the right-hand side with this little arrow so that I can populate as much as I can on the lists field. Now, when we're considering the lists, we have our options down here. Instead of having drop-downs, we have drop-ups because the drop-downs have already been occupied up top. So you have your information or the things you can do basically down below. What we want to do is add multiple items. So we've got the items and we have this little arrow to the right. It's a drop down, but really when you click on it, it's a rise up. So this is an item, rise up. And if we go up top, we can add a new item. So this would be adding one item at a time. So we can add one at a time, but we need to add multiple items. So if you were to, so we're going to go to add or edit multiple items. So we're going to add or edit multiple items. That'll input or open up our item input screen. So our item input screen is going to be looking like this. So now we have the fields that would be included in our items displayed in a horizontal fashion, which makes the data input basically as easy as possible. The data input, as we've seen in the prior presentation, we could do similar data input for customers, vendors, service items, inventory items, and non-inventory items. Those are typically the things that we might want to enter a little bit more quickly into the items field. Now we have our inventory. Now just to show this, we have the items, the sub item, the sales price, and so on. If I close this back out and I enter this one at a time, items drop up or rise up, and add one item at a time, you can see you have the same field. This will be a service item. We have the same fields basically here: item name, sub item description, the rate, same kind of fields in this format. It's just the multiple data entry format is going to be a little bit easier to data input multiple items at one time, but same fields as if you entered one at a time. Closing this back out, let's go back into the items rise up. We're going to go to the add multiple items. So we're going to go to the multiple items once again. And what we want to do is match up the fields that we need. We only want the relevant fields. Now this is going to be the Excel sheet I'll pick this up from. And you can see the headers here. If you're picking this up from somewhere other than a QuickBooks file, the headers might be slightly different. Your descriptions might be slightly different, but you can still line them up to what is in the QuickBooks system. Obviously, you're going to need the name of the item. Now, you might abbreviate the name something different than the sales description and purchase description. We will not here. We will do that when we go to the inventory items. And then you're going to need the price so that you can enter the price, and this will automatically populate the price. And then we need to know what income account it's going to be going to. We're going to say it's going to be some kind of service account as we enter the item. So let's go back on over the QuickBooks. And let's enter this information. So I'm going to say, all right, one other thing we might want to consider is just what this item's going to do when we enter an invoice. So to do that, let's open up this window again. I'm going to go to the Home tab and just realize if I was to create an invoice and enter the item, if I make an invoice and I was to have an item here, if it's a service item, what is it going to do? The invoice would increase accounts receivable, and the other side of that account would be going to the income account or sales or revenue. So that means when we add the item, we have to have the price, and we have to name the price where that amount is going to go to. It's going to go to a revenue account, an income statement account. Okay, so I'm going to close this back out. I'm going to go back to our add and edit items in the open windows. I'm going to close this little window, and now I'm going to adjust these headers up top to line up to the headers I have here. And then we could copy and paste this information in there, or we could just simply data input it and make it as easy to data input as possible. So we have the item name, the sales description, purchase description, sales price, and then the income account. So let's go back on over. To do this, I want to adjust these columns. To do this, I can go to the customize columns up top, customize columns, and these are all the options you have. Their options are over here and over here. These are the ones that are currently included. You could add more of the items on the left. These are kind of like the minimum that would be necessary. So I'm going to put this in a side-by-side window so I can see it on my other screen here. Put this on my other screen, and if it will go over there, it's kind of not going. And so I want the item name. Now this is what's going to be populated on the far left-hand side, and then it's vertical. So the next one down will be the next one to the right. So then I want the sales description to be next. Sales description is over here. The sales description will be found on the invoice when we create the invoice. So it'll be something that'll be in the invoice when we populate it. So I want to include that. So I have the description. I'm going to add here. Notice these two you can add and remove, and then I'm going to move it up because I want it to be number 2 or on the second to the left when I go to this side. So I'm going to move it up. And so now we've got the item name, sales description. Next, I want to have the purchase description. So this is going to be the purchase description. I'll go here. I'm going to add this on the right. May not need the purchase description for a service item, but I'll add it anyways. And then we're going to have the sales price. So we have the sales price, which is already included here. I'm going to move that up. And then we've got the income account. The income account, I'm going to move that up. And so these two I don't need. I don't need this item, so I'm going to remove it. And I don't need the sales tax code because the service items will not have sales tax. So I'm going to remove the sales tax code. And that's what I want. So now I've populated them this way to basically line up with our headers, which here are populated horizontally. So the horizontal headers are now the vertical headers in this format, which will then be the horizontal headers once we hit OK here. So I'm going to hit OK, and now it's got the change. So now we've got the item name, the sales description, the purchase description, the sales price, the income account. You can put your cursor in the middle, kind of like Excel, in the middle of these tabs, and move these to make them a little bit nicer to do your data input. This happens to be short enough that it fits on one screen. Once we go to the inventory items, it will not, and we'll have to use this scroll bar. Now you could then enter this we could copy and paste this now, which would be the easiest way to do, or just do the data input. I'm going to practice doing the data input a little bit, and then I'll go back and we will just copy and paste it to show you both methods. So I'm going to move this over, and I'm just going to enter this as quickly as we could possibly do. You know, we can select here and say, all right, now we have the diagnostic, and I'm going to say diagnostic. It's going to be the same, diagnostic. And I'm hitting tab between the cells. Tab is the fastest way to be moving between cells. This was 68, so that's going to be the sales price. And then the income account is going to be some type of income account. If I hit the drop down, we've got two income accounts, it looks like. We got the sales and shipping and delivery income. Now, I might want a more specific income account. Like I want sales, I might call that for my inventory. Sales sounds like an inventory. That's what's usually used when you use inventory. And so for the service item, I might want to say, let's make a new one. I'm actually going to set up a new account as we go. I'm just going to say add a new account. It's going to be an income type of account. And I'm going to take this and just make it service. I'm just going to make it a general service here. This is going to be a general service item. And all of my service items I'm going to put to that. The description, we don't really need anything else. There's no subcategory. I'm not going to make it a subcategory, just the service item and making sure the account is an income type account. We'll talk more about adding new accounts in a future presentation. So I'm going to say save and close. So there's our service item. And so then I can say tab, and the next one would be hourly service 1. So we've got hourly service. I'm going to copy that now because it's going to be the same for the sales description. So I'm going to copy that, paste it here, paste it here. Price is going to be 140 for that one. Service once again. So now the service is populated. It's going to be the service item. So this, then I'm going to say hourly service 2. I know these are kind of generic names. Apologize, it's not as interesting of a name that we could. We'll have more interesting guitars that we sell, so that'll be good. So 100 on that one, again, service item. So there we have that, and I won't add the last one. So that's how quickly you can do that. Now I'm going to try to just simply copy and paste it. Now I'm going to delete this and see if we can then simply copy and paste this whole thing. So if I select these items and delete them, I'm going to delete, 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 delete. And see if we can start from scratch. We can paste it over the top, but I'd rather just have it nice and clean here. And then what I'm going to do is try to just take this whole sheet, this Excel sheet here, and I have the proper layout in terms of the headers, so I should just be able to copy this whole thing. I'm just going to try to highlight this entire thing, right click and copy it, and then I'll minimize this. And I'll put it right here and just say, can I just paste that? Right click and paste it. And there we have it. It populates it for us. So that's, instead of importing the Excel sheet, that's basically the fastest way to do this. You can just copy and paste what you need into it. I think that's going to be the fastest way to go if you have this information in some type of spreadsheet. Now I'm actually going to add one more column that wasn't on our spreadsheet related to the sales tax. Now these are all going to be non-taxable, but I want to be able to post that it's non-taxable. So when we did our Excel worksheet, note that you could have done this by adding something to the Excel worksheet, for example, and then uploading it or copying and pasting it at one time, or you can adjust the columns as we did and copy and paste what is in the Excel worksheet into the system and then add what is not there. So that's what we will do now. I'm going to go to the customize columns up top and add the item that wasn't on the Excel worksheet, which is going to be the sales tax code. And I'm going to move that on over and I'll put that on the end. Sales tax code, I'm going to say OK. Now our default setting was to set everything as taxable unless we say otherwise. And these are all otherwise because these are service items which are not taxable in the US typically. So I'm going to then say all the service items are non-tax items. So therefore when we create the invoice, they will not be adding sales tax. Once you have completed that, Looks pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and say save changes down below. And that should populate it over here, so you can have our service items here. So this is back to our lists now. So if I went to the lists up top and the item lists, now we have these items that are listed out. Once again, you could change kind of the format of these columns to see how long the columns are. And so there are our items. Now, if you wanted to go into any individual item, you could select the item, you could double click on that item, and it'll take you into the data input, which you will see looks very similar here. So to the data input, you can do this one at a time and enter it in this format. Also note, if you had any problem or if you want to enter them one at a time in the future, then you can go to the items drop down below. Instead of going add or edit multiple, you can go into the new up top and simply go to the service item and then enter exactly what we have here. Same kind of thing. Diagnostic would be here for the first item, and then diagnostic for the description. The rate would be 68 for that first item, non-taxable, and then it would be a service item. And then instead of closing it, you can go to the next one and just enter them one at a time as you enter it. For example, if I was to have entered this diagnostic, then I can enter this diagnostic, and instead of closing it and open up in the next one, I can go to next. Well, it doesn't have the next screen here, but as you enter the new ones, it'll have next, and then you can just continue on and enter them. And that's fairly quick, not quite as quick as the data input screen would be. So now let's take a look at what will happen when we enter this information into an invoice. We're not going to record an invoice, but I just want to check one out. So I'm going to open up our open windows again with this little triangle. Let's go to the home screen. And back to the home screen, we can use these items in the create invoice or the sales receipt. Let's go ahead and create an invoice. So if I open up then the invoice, this is going to be what we send out when we bill the customer. So if we were to choose a customer, we don't have any yet, but we could choose a customer when it's appropriate. And then in the item down below, we can select the item, pick up the diagnostic, and it'll populate the amount for us, or the price. If there were multiple diagnostics, we could say 2, and then it'll calculate 2 times the rate of the 68 and populate that for us. That allows anybody to basically be able to create the invoice as easily as possible. Notice that the tax down here, we don't have anything included for the tax due to the fact that it's a non-taxable item. So we're not including any tax for these service items. Now next we're going to be uploading or inputting the inventory items where we will have tax affected. Also note that the service items are a little bit easier because there's no inventory to track. And therefore, the recording of the invoice will simply be an increase to the accounts receivable and an increase to sales. When we add the inventory, it's also going to have to decrease the inventory and record the cost of goods sold. Therefore, it's going to be a bit more complex for us to enter the inventory items next time. I'm going to close this back out. I'm not going to record it. We're not recording anything yet, and that's going to be it for now.